Hey there, this is Ross Izzard, and this is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in more interesting places. Welcome back to the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast. We've been out for about 2.5 months now, which is a longer break than we usually take, and I apologize for that. But number one, life got pretty wild. If anybody follows politics, obviously my day job is in politics and legislative work, and Colorado in particular has had an absolutely savage legislative session that is focused on an enormous budget deficit that we are slowly figuring out how to plug, and in the process having a whole bunch of existential fights about who gets cut and who doesn't, which has been not the most fun that I've ever had, and has also significantly cut into my ability to do the podcast. But we're coming out of that. Things are mostly intact. The sky has not fallen. I'm still getting out there and fishing, and in fact, I'm starting to get out there and fish more because the weather's getting better. The world is kind of reopening to us. There are some options out there to get back into the backcountry, and I'm starting to get excited, right? I'm starting to get that itch to get back out there, and that's been really, really fun. I'm glad to be back. I'm super excited about season 5. I have gotten probably more listener feedback and questions and suggestions about what to do with season 5 than I have for the other 4 seasons combined, which is cool. So the engagement is awesome. If you guys are among those who are writing in or sending me messages or whatever, thank you. It's been really, really cool to see that happen. And I am going to try to get to as many of those things as I possibly can this season. But we are also going to really dig hard on the backcountry aspect of the podcast, and more specifically, the stuff you really need to know about the backcountry, not just from a gear perspective and a tactics perspective, but from a philosophical perspective. We have dabbled in that in previous seasons, and that has been good. Obviously, there are a lot of fishing podcasts out there, a lot of fly fishing podcasts out there. Most of them are sort of in the how-to explainer category, which is fine. I listen to them. I'm sure a lot of you do too, and you can learn a lot from them. I'm not sure you can learn how to fly fish from a podcast. I have questions about that, but you can learn specific aspects, or at least get your brain turning in the right direction by listening to a podcast. This podcast, though, is a little bit different. We do get into gear and tactics and how to fish, and of course, I hear from a lot of you about those episodes. I'm always happy to talk about it. We are still fly fishing. There are still techniques involved. So I don't want to say that we're never going to talk about that. In fact, we will, of course, talk about that this season and every season that we have. But also, we're doing more than just fishing out there, right? And we're looking for more than just fish. And we've talked about that on the podcast before, but I really don't think it can be said too often. And I think it's worth reiterating that this particular strain of fly fishing, backcountry fly fishing, which involves hiking off into the middle of nowhere, being in the wilderness, putting yourself in challenging positions and challenging situations, dealing with exposure, dealing with isolation, dealing with solitude, dealing with a lack of easily accessible help. All of those things are fundamentally different than just fly fishing. And in fact, I was thinking about this while I was hiking the other day. You think about the amount of time that we spend as backcountry anglers doing stuff that's not fly fishing while we're out there, and it's pretty enormous, right? So think about the hiking or the driving or the off-roading or the packing or the navigation or the camping or anything that you might be doing out there just to get to the water you're going to fish or get yourself safely out of it. And that's a whole different thing. And we're doing it in part because we really like being outside, and the outdoor skills are fun to develop. That mastery thing is huge. But also because I think that there is this underlying current with backcountry fly fishing where these are folks who need more from the experience, from the outdoors, from nature, from the wilderness, from the water, from the fish, than just driving up, pulling over, hopping in the river, catching a few, taking a picture, and calling it a day. We're looking for something different, and we are, I'm just going to say this, even though it sounds a little bit woo-woo, we feel called to harder experiences in wilder places that feel more pure, that feel more earned, and that feel more meaningful than just fly fishing. And I really think that's what makes this so special. This activity is not just fly fishing. It is this incredible marriage of all these different outdoor disciplines and skills and knowledge bases and everything into a single pursuit that, yes, is focused around water and streams and lakes and trout or other fish in some cases. I've heard from a lot of you about that too. But it's surrounded by all this other stuff. And ultimately, all of that other stuff is designed to help get you out there and help you operate in remote areas where you're not going to see a lot of traffic, and sometimes you're not going to see any traffic. And I really want to spend some time this season delving into that. Not just the gear side, although we're going to talk about that. Not just the fishing side, we're going to talk about that too. But really the mental side of, what the hell are we doing out there and why? And how can you enhance that? And where can you find that sort of meaningful experience? It might not be all the way out in the wilderness. And in fact, that's what we're going to talk about today, with the concept of frontier waters and more accessible backcountry. But really, how do we connect more with the environment and with these incredible places that we are fortunate to fish in, not just so we can be better anglers and not just so we can be better outdoorsmen and women, but so that we can be better people. And I think that is something that is not often talked about in fly fishing. There's a lot of sort of half-assed philosophical discussion about peace and serenity and all those things, and that's true to some extent, but I don't think you find yourself in peace and serenity. And the truth is, when you're out there in a lot of these environments, especially if you're by yourself, you're not feeling incredibly peaceful and serene a lot of the time. And in fact, what these things do is they strip away most of your control. And that's part of the appeal of it. They require you to be focused. They require you to be paying attention. They require you to be present. They require you to be prepared. They require you to make good decisions. They require you to deal with stress and pressure and exposure and conditions that can just fall out from underneath you at any given time and variables, and still perform and show up and be there. And it's usually not until I'm back at the car after I get back from one of these trips where I finally sort of go, oh man, now I feel the peace and the satisfaction. Really, satisfaction is a better word, that I was able to go out and do this thing and experience this thing and go through that and be successful and maintain focus and catch the fish, get to the spot and get myself back out safely. That's really the thing that we're looking for. That's where I get the payoff. It's not when I catch the fish. It's not just when I'm off in the river, even though that part is magical. It's the whole experience of being out there. And I think understanding that more and talking about it more is really central to what we're doing here in the podcast. And that is going to be a big part of our focus just in general, but especially here in season 5. So buckle up if you're that kind of angler. If you're hoping that I'm going to teach you how to tie a 78-foot leader out of some kind of magical violin string, you're probably going to be disappointed because I don't care about any of that shit, and I don't think you need to do it to catch fish. Oops, said the quiet part out loud. But if you are here to learn some skills, become a better angler, learn about gear, learn about being prepared, learn about being out there safely and operating effectively in wilderness environments, and also engaging with and wrestling with the really important psychological part of the sport, then you're in the right place. And I think we're going to have a hell of a time in season 5. So I'm excited about it, guys. Buckle up. Before we get into that, though, a couple small notes. Number 1, as always, if you are coming back to the show after having listened to the previous seasons and you're having a good time, please do not forget to leave a review on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, wherever you want to do it. It really doesn't matter. I see all of them and they're all super helpful. Love that. Send me a note if you would like to do that. That would be wonderful. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss any updates once we get rolling with the season here. And always feel free to engage with me however you want. Send me a message on Instagram. You can send me one on Facebook, although I'll be honest, I am not as active on there as I probably should be because Facebook gives me hives, but maybe one day I'll get back to it. Send me an email at backcountryflyfishingpodcast@gmail.com or whatever, right? I've got a few of you who have become like almost pen pals that I'm writing back and forth to, including a few of you who actually text me, which is fine. So feel free to reach out however you want. I love hearing from you. And don't forget to go out there. And if you're enjoying the show, let me know that you're enjoying the show. If you're not enjoying the show, then I don't know, let me know if you're not enjoying the show too. I'd love to hear from you and see if we can do something better. But it might also be that, hey, maybe this just isn't really for you. Maybe this backcountry fly fishing stuff is just kind of not what you're into, and that's okay. I've heard from a few of you that are like, well, I just think it's stupid. Like, why you don't need to hike 20 miles to catch a 8-inch brook trout? That's stupid. Why would I do that? It's inefficient and silly. I mean, okay, I hear you. And this probably is not the show for you. You probably have better things to do with your time. That's not how I fish because, like I said, I'm looking for something deeper than that. But hey, to each their own. Fly fishing is an intensely personal sport. As I say all the time, you can do it however you want. I'm not going to get in the way of that. But here, we are going to be talking about the wilderness side of this because that's who we are and it's what we do. So let's get started with that. And our first discussion here is really about the process of getting back into the backcountry and back into more secluded and more remote water. And I want to start with a story. So, during the wintertime, I start to get a little edgy and people notice. And I still fish in the winter. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about that here. You've seen the pictures, you've seen the posts. I'm still out there. I still get out there pretty often, not as often as I do in the warmer months, but I'm still out there probably every week, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on what I have going on with the insanity of legislative session. And it can be a really rewarding time of year. It's slower, it's quieter, it's pretty. And if you're willing to deal with the cold and the psychology of the cold, which we talked about last season, so don't forget to check out that episode if you have questions about it. But if you're willing to go out and do all that stuff, you can still have a lot of fun in the winter. And so I don't mean to say that the wintertime sucks necessarily, but the wintertime does kind of suck. And you're stuck on these tailwaters because they're the only things that are really ice-free and warm enough to fish. You're usually jammed into pretty crowded areas, or at least more crowded comparatively than you would see during the warmer months when we can all spread out into what I consider to be real backcountry fly fishing. You very often are dealing with really tough, kind of shitty conditions. The water's cold, the air temps are cold, the fishing is slow. And it's still fly fishing. It's still fun, right? It's kind of hard to have a bad day fly fishing, to be honest. Although I have managed a few, if I'm being perfectly blunt. But usually you're going to have a good time out there. And so I don't mean to take away from that. But I do mean that by the time I am done with the winter and it starts warming up and it starts feeling like spring and the snow starts coming off, I am so ready to get back out there. Because the truth is, I sort of lose myself when I'm inside. And I've talked to a lot of folks, a lot of outdoorsmen who feel the same way. And so I don't feel off base in saying it. I don't really feel like myself in a city environment. I don't. I don't really feel like myself inside. I don't. I don't feel like myself driving up to tailwater and hopping out and walking 100 yards and then fishing next to 6 other dudes. That doesn't do it for me. And I don't feel like me. And I spend more time by necessity in the winter being inside, being in the city, being in professional environments, which, no complaints. It pays the bills. And I like what I do for a living. So don't take me wrong there. But it doesn't feel like me. My heart is in the woods. My heart is off in the mountains. It's off in these remote regions, streams that nobody's heard of, tributaries that nobody's fished, lakes that dare you to try to get to them. That's where my heart and soul lives. When I'm out there, I feel like me. I feel focused. I feel present. I feel engaged. And I'm the fully actualized version of myself, to the point that I actually have people in my life who will talk about me like I'm Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like I have split personalities where there's like Ross, city Ross, work Ross, political Ross. And then there's outdoors Ross. And outdoors Ross is the version of me that people connect the most with. And I think it's because it's the one that is the most grounded and settled in what I'm doing. I just feel maybe not at peace, but I feel in tune with myself. I feel attuned to myself. And it's a really incredible feeling that I lose over the winter, if I'm being honest. No matter how much I fish, even if I'm hiking into a tailwater and it's a couple mile hike or whatever, I mean, you can sort of maybe kind of recreate the feeling, but it's never quite the same as the real deal. And all of that is to say that by the time spring rolls around, so let's say we're late March, right now I'm recording this in April, it'll go up actually in mid-April. And by the time I get back to that, the little whisper in me that's like, hey man, it's time to get back out there. Don't you want to get back out there? Starts to become a shout. And I start to feel so disconnected from myself and who I am and what I do and where I need to be that I develop it's almost like a rabid need to get back out there and get into something fun and get into something challenging and do something hard. I want to feel like I earn those fish. I want to feel like I earn the experience and the memories and the pictures and everything that I take back with me from these trips. I want to feel that. And I often don't feel that in the winter. So once it's time to get back out there, I'm ready to go. And usually I've got my boots are in the trunk, my shit's packed up, my pack's ready to go, my rods are ready to go. I've gone through the process of prepping all my gear, which we're going to talk about this season as a matter of fact, but I'm ready to rock. And then I run face first into a brick wall, or at least I have in some years past. And the reason for that is that you might be ready to go and get out there. You might be desperate to get out there. You might really, really need to get back into the backcountry, and nature doesn't care, right? Nature doesn't care about you. I've said that a million times. It doesn't care about you now. It will not care about you next year. It doesn't care about you in the winter. It doesn't care about you in the spring. It doesn't care about any of us, this big society and civilization that we've built. The natural world does not care about any of that. It lives by its own timelines. It lives by its own patterns and its own habits, none of which will bend for you, none of which will change to give you what you need. You just have to live with it. And I think that's actually one of the beauties of what we're doing is that you're not in charge. You're not in control. You're reacting to something else and you can't control it no matter what you do. And in some ways, that's a very freeing experience. And it's something I'd like to explore more this season. But for now, let's just say this. You may be desperate to get out there. I certainly am. But you're not going to be going to serious backcountry stuff at this point. You're not. If you try to go way, way up high elevations, especially here in the Mountain West, you're going to start running into snowpack. And it's going to be probably either dangerous, especially without avalanche gear and avalanche training and the right equipment, or impassable, or really not worth doing. And yes, I know we really haven't gotten a lot of snow this year, and I've seen pictures of you guys out there hiking, and that's all well and good. But the reality is there is still a lot of snow up there. I've seen it because I've been out checking these places out. And also, even if there weren't, the water temperatures are still so low that it's really not worth fishing at those higher elevations. I mean, you might have seen them warm up at this point at, let's say, 10 or 11,000 feet to maybe the mid to high 30s at this point as the ice comes off. There are a handful of lakes that are right around like that 9.5 to 10,000 foot level where the inlets are just barely starting to ice off, but they're not looking great either. And the reality is those areas are just not open yet. The doors aren't open. So you can want to go. You might even be able to get in there. I mean, hell, I've jumped a gun on this and snowshoed into stuff before, or spiked my way into something and gotten there, and the river is kind of open in 4 spots, and I try to fish it, and it sucks because it's not ready yet. All right, that's me trying to impose what I want on nature, and that doesn't work. It's also kind of disrespectful, to be honest with you, in some ways, but regardless of whether you feel that way or not, it isn't going to work, so it's not really worth doing. And that means you really can't get out there into the, quote, true backcountry, even though you want to, even though you're desperate. You can't get out there right now. Similarly, you're so sick of these damn tailwaters and everything to do with all of these waters right next to town that you probably can't even stand the idea of fishing them again. That's how I feel. I fished basically every inch of these things a million times. I know every rock in every single one of these rivers. And by the time the winter is over, I am so sick of being on those rivers, dealing with these picky, artificially challenging tailwater fish. Yeah, that's right. I said it. Artificially challenging. These fish are not acting like wild trout. They're acting like fish who have had their environment jacked with by human beings in the form of a dam that's washing tons of food down the river and making them fat and huge, in the form of angler pressure, in the form of man-made obstructions and jacking around with the flows and everything else. These fish are not acting normally. They're not. They just aren't. And as a result, they can be really hard to catch. And some people sort of like get off on that. They're like, oh, it's so hard to catch tailwater fish if you're not perfect. And I mean, yeah, that's true. But that's because we messed with them, right? Like at some point, we're just creating artificial challenge. And those trout are not acting like wild trout. And my thing is, I want to catch wild trout acting like wild trout in wild places. That's what I want. I don't want to catch a fish that's been caught 482 times and now knows every single fly pattern you could possibly throw at them. I want to catch the fish that are out there doing what they do as they're supposed to in a natural environment. So I don't want to go to the tailwaters, and I don't want to go to the water that's right next to town with the pull-offs and everything else. And I don't want to be one of those guys that's out there the second the local river ices off or becomes just warm enough to fish, who's out there with 50 other people fighting for a 10-foot slice of the pie. I don't want to do that. In fact, a lot of days, especially by the end of the winter, I would rather not fish than go do that. Truly, I'll just stay home rather than do that. And I do on a regular basis because I don't want to get involved in that. And I've had enough of it. And so the question is, what am I to do? What are you to do in the situation? Because I bet if you're listening to this podcast, you probably feel the same way. You're probably like, damn it, I got to get back out there. I feel lost not being out there, not being in the wild, not hiking, not going to hard places, not being by myself. I don't feel okay. And so you want to get out there, but you have very limited options to get out there. And you sort of have two choices at that point. You can either throw your hands up and say, well, I guess I'm screwed. I'll try again in June or July when the high alpine lakes open up or whatever. You could just relegate yourself to fishing those shitty close to town waters and catch a few and tell yourself that's great, but probably not. Or, yeah, you could just check out. Or you could get creative about where you go and fish. And that is where the idea of frontier waters comes up. And that sounds very epic. And maybe it shouldn't sound so epic, because the truth is it's really not all that epic of a concept. So you can also call it accessible backcountry or whatever you want. But I call it frontier water. And frontier water for me is water that is not necessarily far away from town or from where you live. It's not necessarily hard to access as far as drive time or absolute distance, but it is off the beaten trail enough to provide you with that sort of experience and the vibe and the feeling and the connection that you're looking for. So you may not be able to get out to the big backcountry, but you can, if you're careful and if you're thoughtful about how you do this, and if you're willing to explore and maybe willing to have a little bit of failure built into that, there's a lot of water that is overlooked and walked right past and generally ignored, probably not too far from you and from where you live, that is open right now and can help you sort of scratch that need and that backcountry itch right now, if you're willing to do the work. So let me tell you a story. I was out just, let's say a week ago or so, and there is a really awesome creek not too far from where I live. I'm not going to name it because spot burning sucks and I don't do that. But this creek, at least the fishable section, the best fishable section, runs through a really pretty canyon, this beautiful canyon with this ancient forest. The creek itself is gorgeous. It's super clear most of the time. It really never gets, well, I shouldn't say that. It usually is at a fairly fishable flow. It is covered in pocket water and these really interesting seams and current patterns. I mean, it's just a fabulous stream, and it's packed with wild brown trout and wild rainbow trout. It's just packed with them. It's great. And it's a wonderful place. And because it's a wonderful place, and it's only really about, let's say, an hour from the city, and even less than that from some of the outlying areas of the sort of Front Range metro area, it gets a lot of traffic in certain places. Okay, so let me set this up for you. You drive in, it's about an hour from where I live, and you park in this sort of trailhead lot, right? And there's almost always people there at the trailhead lot. There are mountain bikers and hikers and trail runners and tourists and sometimes anglers and other people. And it's usually pretty busy. In fact, it's so busy that a lot of us who, are conditioned to want empty trailheads. I mean, hell, I want to show up to a trailhead and not see a single other car or a set of tire prints or footprint or any of that. I want that. So when you first pull up, you're kind of like, oh, man, I don't know about this. But here's the thing. That trailhead basically connects a loop that runs all the way around this canyon and this section of the creek. It's about I think a 10-mile loop or something like that. I don't remember exactly how long it is because I don't care about doing loop. I just care about accessing the water. And it crosses the stream twice. So if you can picture, a rough loop drawn out, and it covers sort of this entire canyon from the trailhead in one direction and comes all the way back to the trailhead in the other direction. It crosses the river twice at 2 points, 2 opposing points in the loop. And in both of those cases, the sections are nice and they're pretty. People fish them all the time. They'll hike in and, strap up and hop in and fish, and it gets busy right by the trail there. And every now and then you'll have some intrepid people who will wander off the trail a tiny bit, 50 yards, 100 yards, something like that, but not very far. They're mostly sticking to the trail. The trail is we're like robots on trails. It's like, oh, there's a path. I better follow it. And then you follow it all the way through without any mind toward what you're walking past and what you're not seeing. But the interesting thing about this canyon is that between those 2 points, the 2 points where the trail crosses the stream, there is 4 miles of canyon between those 2 points. There's no trail in that section, or at least most of it. There's a little tiny bit of a social trail on one end of it, but for the most part, there's not a lot back there. And the terrain becomes pretty wild pretty quickly, right? So there are these hydraulic choke points built into that canyon, just like many canyons, where the walls of the canyon get tight together, which forces the stream into obviously a bottleneck, which creates really difficult sort of white water sections to get past. Now, at really high flows, those sections are probably pretty damn close to impassable. And even at the lower flows, when I was there, they were not easy. I had one that I waded through almost up to my chest, which was basically swimming and not very pleasant because the water was 43 degrees and I was wet wading. But, I made it through that one. And then there was another one that I did actually have to swim. There was no way to get around it. I had to get in the water and swim a little bit to get through it and make my way over the boulders and over the choke. Probably not the safest thing that I've ever done, but, hey, I made it happen. And it's a really amazing thing because I want you to understand this canyon is not very far away. In fact, from certain points on the hike, when you're up on the ridgeline before you descend into the canyon, you can actually see the city pretty clearly through a little gap in the mountains and in the canyon. And so it's not far away, right? And it was amazing to me, and it is amazing to me, that when you go in there, once you get a few hundred yards from the trail, the signs of human activity drop off dramatically, right? So no more silly teepees built in the woods, no more wrappers, no more trash, no more footprints. They start to drop off. You might see a few, but they're starting to drop off. Once you get past that first big hydraulic choke, there's nothing back there. No human sign. Not a boot print, not a broken stick, not a candy wrapper, not a cigarette, nothing. There's nothing back there. And that's only a few hundred yards off the trail, maybe a quarter mile off the trail. And then you have all of this incredible water, 4 miles of this water to explore and to be in. And I got to tell you guys, I've done parts of this canyon. I had not done a full traverse of the canyon where I went from where the trail drops you over the river at one point all the way through the canyon to the next place where the trail intersects the river above. I hadn't done that before. And when I got back there, it was incredible to me how rough the terrain was. I mean, I was whacking through bushes. I was climbing over boulders. I was swimming choke points, like I said. At one point, I ran into like a mountain lion den, really big area that had probably a dozen kill sites in it, bones and carcasses and everything else. There's obviously serious predators active back there, which really doesn't happen in places that have a lot of human activity. And I was able to forget that I was only really an hour from home and maybe 30 minutes from civilization. And I was able to scratch that itch, right? I felt my brain come back online. I felt my muscle memory kick back in. I felt myself returning to the version of me that exists in those places and really kind of only in those places. And I don't know how to exactly to describe that to you. It's not like a switch. It's not like a sudden change. I think most of you probably know how this feels, and maybe I don't need to describe it. But for anybody who doesn't, it's like a form of soft clarity. Like the whole world gets quieter and slows down a little bit. You start noticing more details. Your mind frees itself up of all the bullshit that you're dealing with back in quote real life, because you've got to focus. You have to be present. It demands presence, it demands attention, and demands that you be in it, in nature, in the water, in that environment, truly, in order to succeed and be safe and make your way through it and execute the plan, which for me in this case was traversing the entire length of this canyon. And so I made it all the way through the canyon. I caught a ton of fish. I took some amazing pictures, which of course I posted on Instagram. So if you guys want to go check it out, take a look. That's really nothing about my photography skills and all about the place. And when you look at those pictures, remember that place is not very far away from town, right? And so when I talk about frontier waters, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about water that is not far away, probably has a name that a lot of people know, maybe attracts angling pressure in certain areas, but really has not been fully explored and hasn't been fully appreciated. And this can take a whole bunch of different forms, right? So this could be, in my case, this sort of untracked section of stream and canyon that people just don't go to. In fact, if anybody's ever been there before, I've never heard of it. I haven't read anything about it. I saw no sign of them. I'm not saying I was the first person in history to do it. I'm sure I wasn't. Uh, but certainly it's not happening often. And God knows when the last person was back there. I have no idea. So unless they were like a ninja and left no sign, which I guess is possible, but maybe not. But, think about where you can use trails or roads or even more heavily trafficked access points as access points, not as trails, not as robotic. I'm going to follow this until I finish the trail, but as okay, it hits the stream there and it doesn't really follow the stream the whole way, right? And you'll see this with trails all the time. They'll follow a stream for a little bit and then they'll break off and go up a ridge line. Sometimes they just cross the stream and then they carry off in a whole different direction. Sometimes they intersect the stream and then you're just supposed to like turn around and go back, like an out and back trail. But that leaves all of this water for you to go check out. And so much of it is off trail, unexplored, very lightly fished, and it can be incredible. And this is, it's not a totally dissimilar concept from blue lining, right? In that you're picking these streams, and they usually are small streams. Although I'll be honest with you, I was in a canyon just last week that is a really big river. It's actually the primary river in that drainage, so not a small stream. And if I were to tell you the name of the river, which I won't, of course, you would be like, oh, God, everybody knows that. Ross, shut up, dude. Who are you? But this section doesn't really get fished. Why? Well, because it's hard to access. It takes planning. You've got to kind of think about where you're going to go. You're going to be off trail. It's going to be a hike. It's going to involve you being by yourself off in the bush for a pretty lengthy period of time. And a lot of people just aren't going to do that. They're just not. They're going to go to the easier parts, and that's where they're going to fish. But if you're willing to get in there, this particular canyon is not 4 miles. It's like 25 miles of largely untracked water that you can get in there and explore, which is what I'm spending my time doing now for the next few weeks, is really mapping out the parts of this canyon that I haven't seen, because I've been going there for years, and now I'm kind of working on the other sections. And if you're willing to do that, you're going to find some surprisingly good stuff that is within easy striking distance of home. Doesn't have to be backpacking trips. I mean, we're getting to the point in the year where it's warm enough to camp and backpack if you'd like to. So rad, knock yourself out. I'm not trying to dissuade you from that. I certainly will be doing that. But you can get out there even for a day trip and really get your backcountry fix, your wilderness fix, your you fix. And that's a really incredible feeling, right? And look, it is going to require work on your part. you're going to have to investigate these places. Most of these spots are not places that people have written about. They just aren't. You're not going to find stuff in the local fishing report. You're not going to find stuff in a local guide shop. You're probably not going to find a lot online, maybe a blog post here or there from a crazy person like me who's been in there before, but you're not going to find much. What you're going to wind up doing is you're going to pick trails in the area of these streams that you want to fish, because they're probably going to be streams at this point. I mean, there may be some alpine lakes sitting around that are worth talking about, but that's an edge case. For the most part, this time of year, you're looking for something lower elevation where the snow is mostly off and the water temperatures are high enough that the fish have spread out and started to get active. That's probably going to be in moving water, and that moving water is very often going to be in a canyon or a valley, sometimes in a meadow, but often in a canyon. And so starting in those areas and finding trails on All Trails or on Onyx or wherever you want to look for the trails, and looking for how those trails interact with the water and where they touch the water. Or even if there aren't trails, looking at where you might be able to park and then find your way down a slope or down a rib or whatever, or a draw down to the water so that you can access it that way, assuming it's on public land, of course. Don't trespass. That's not cool. But really starting to dig into that, right? Doing trail research, pulling the topo maps, really spending some time with the satellite maps, looking at the terrain and being like, man, I've fished this stretch and everybody knows about this stretch, but what about this one over here, right? Because so many of these streams, I mean, they're hundreds of miles long, or at least dozens of miles long. And that is something that people just ignore. They go to the easy parts and then they forget that there's a whole river there to go explore in a lot of cases. And if you're willing to sit down and really spend some time agonizing over the topo maps, thinking about your entrance strategy, your exit strategy, the path you would take, what kind of vegetation is on the banks and how thick is it? How gnarly does the terrain look? Can you pass that boulder field? Do you think that choke point is navigable? How do you know when to turn around? What happens if you get stuck? All of that stuff is going to get you into some really incredible water. And it's also going to have a couple of other benefits. The first one being that you get to plan something. And for me, the planning portion, the investigation, the research, the preparation, the mental game of getting ready to go execute a mission, really, is where it's at. Like, I derive so much value from that. And the idea of sort of building this plan, at home, I'm sitting there on a Friday night and I'm digging and I'm looking at maps and I'm pulling satellite imagery and I'm talking like a crazy person with red yarn on the wall. I mean, I look like a crazy guy. But for me, building the plan and then taking that plan out into the real world where things will be different, right? The terrain won't look the same to you as it did on the satellite. Maybe that exit that you picked isn't really a good exit and you got to go figure something else out. Maybe your access point won't work. Maybe the water conditions aren't what you were expecting, because let's be real, a lot of these places, they're not going to have USGS stations. You're not going to know what the hell you're walking into until you get there. Maybe you are going to have weather conditions that blow you up. Maybe there's going to be some type of other challenge that pops up. And the idea of taking that plan and then putting it in the real world and watching it get pressure tested and blown up and then executing on it and being present enough to make decisions in the moment and react to it and adapt, that is really where it's at for me. That's where I get to be me. And that's the feeling that I'm looking for. That feeling when I get back, and it might not have gone perfectly. I might not have been able to do the full traverse. Something might have gone wrong. I might have had to bail early. Who knows? Failure is always on the table. Sometimes you show up, there's no water in the damn creek, right? Especially now when there's no snow. And we'll talk more about that too. But some of these will end in failure. And even when they do, it's okay, because we're not really out there just for the fish, right? Like, of course, I want to get to the water and catch a fish and get my picture and all that stuff. Of course. But to be honest with you, I'm happy in a lot of cases going out, scouting, exploring, planning, getting in there, looking at it in real life with my Mark 1 eyeballs. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I wind up hiking back out. I get in my car. I still have that same feeling that I went out, I accomplished something, I did something that was hard, that I needed to earn. And it might not have worked out, but I still showed up and I still executed it and I still did it. And I still get that feeling of return to myself when I get back in the car, so that I am re-energized and ready to get back to being city Ross or day-to-day Ross. And really, that's what we're doing, right? It's about coming back to yourself. But the next question for that is why, right? When you say that a lot on the podcast, the most existential question a human being can ever ask is why. So why is it so important for us to go out there and do this and find that feeling and feel reconnected to ourselves through our interaction with nature? Well, the answer is because then you get to take that back into your regular life and it makes you better, right? It makes you a better partner. It makes you a better worker. It makes you a better business owner. It makes you a better parent. It makes you better at everything because really, if we're being honest, without getting too far into motivational speaking, being actualized as a human being, really reaching your potential, operating at your fullest possible potential, at your highest possible level, requires you to be absolutely in tune with yourself and to have that sort of quiet knowing of who you are and what you're capable of that just pushes you into the realm of this sort of flow state and being truly in yourself, in your skin, comfortable with that, and able to operate with that level of absolute clarity. You get to bring that back from the backcountry. And it doesn't matter if it's real backcountry, air quotes, or if it's frontier water where it's kind of in between or whatever, and you just went out and experimented. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you did something that scratched that itch. And that is the most important thing to me. So as spring progresses, this is how I'm going to be spending my time. I'm hanging at lower elevations, so probably nothing really above 8,000, maybe up to 9,000, depending on where I happen to be feet. I'm looking for places where I think the water is warm enough for the fish to be warming up. And in fact, I'm just starting to catch fish on dry flies in a lot of these places, which is incredible. Places where I think I'm going to have to work. There's going to be some challenge involved. It's not easy. Places where I don't think I'm going to see anybody. Places where I feel like I'm going to have ownership of the experience and not 50 other guys that are like, oh yeah, man, I did that last week. And they're clogging up my pictures and ruining. I don't want that. I want to get out there and it be me and nature and the fish and the water. And that's it. And you know what? Right now in the early season, even though I wish I was off in the big mountains and hiking up to the high alpine lakes and doing all the stuff that will come later in the season, I am immensely grateful to have so much unexplored frontier water right here in my backyard that's just sitting there for me to get out and enjoy because most people, well, to be honest with you, most people are lazy and they're not going to go check it out. And so it's just sitting there and it's there for you to discover. It's there for you to appreciate. It's there for you to enjoy if you are willing to change your thinking from, well, I'll just do the normal thing and follow the trail to, okay, I really got to get out there. I really want to get into something good. Let me start investigating how I do that, even if it means that I'm not driving too far. That's an awesome game, guys. And to be honest with you, if you're just starting out in backcountry fly fishing, you could spend years doing this before you graduate to bigger, scarier, more dangerous stuff. Years doing it. You could do nothing but this for your entire fly fishing career and probably have an incredible time. So don't get discouraged about the fact that you can't go up to the high alpine lakes and you can't reach that stream at 11,000 feet and you're not catching cutthroat right now. Don't stress about that. And don't feel like you either have to go back to the tailwaters or, sit around and wish you were dead because you're not fishing and don't have any options. Break out your map, break out Google, break out some time at your desk or outside or mowing the lawn, whatever you want to do. I don't care when you do your thinking, sitting at the vise tying flies, wherever you want to do it, spend some time thinking about this. Retrain your brain to be looking for these places and finding them, and then get out there and go check them out, guys. You're going to have a wonderful time. And even if they don't all work out, enough of them will that you are going to find yourself getting that sort of rush and return that we are all looking for as we do this. So that's what I've got for you today. All about getting back out there, getting back in the swing of things. Next week, we're actually going to talk a little bit more about getting your gear prepped and my system for staying efficient as backcountry season rolls back around and we start getting ready for that, because it really does make sense to have all your stuff in order so that life is easier and you don't have to constantly be reinventing the wheel and forgetting things and everything else. We're going to talk about wet wading and how you deal with that. I've had a ton of questions about how you wet wade in the backcountry and how you carry boots and what do you do and what's your system. So we're going to talk about that stuff too. And then we're going to talk about some of these deeper layers, which I'm actually really excited about. I think that you guys are going to, if not enjoy all of it, because some of it's kind of heavy, to be honest, but in a good way and in a way that I think we all relate to as backcountry anglers and as humans. You're at least going to get something out of it. And that's what I want. I want the people that listen to this podcast to walk away not just being better anglers, not just being better at catching fish, but being better at knowing who they are and at being comfortable with who they are and with how they experience and utilize wilderness and time outside and remote areas to really drive that type of self-knowing and self-growth and self-development that creates awesome human beings. Because you are a better human being for being a backcountry angler. There, I said it. You can argue with me if you want, but you're not going to convince me otherwise. This stuff is good for you. And I'm excited that you're doing it. I can't wait to get out and do more of it. And in fact, I'm going to get off of here now and go start planning my next trip. And I will look forward to seeing all of you back here, hopefully with some stories of your own, next week for episode 2 of season 5. Thanks, guys. Take care. Be safe. We'll be back in just a few days. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. And hey, it might not even be that far from town.